Good morning, you're welcome to Awakenings TV. My name is Tamara Pitelen and this is Vanya Silverten. We're doing a series on asking the universe questions about things that are of interest to us. Vanya is a intuitive healer and channel, and she has an ability to connect to the universe to receive all sorts of information. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what she does and how she does that, go back to the first episode in this series on cosmetic surgery, and at the start of that she talks a little bit about what it is like for her to connect, and it's fascinating, let me tell you. And we can all do it apparently, just not yet. So today we are going to talk about addictions. It's fascinating for me how, as humans, if there is any stress in our lives or anything unpleasant or anything, even just daily stress, we don't generally do things that are good for ourselves to deal with that. We go to the not so healthy things, like we'll go to alcohol or cigarettes or food or many of the other things that people do, and then they get addicted to these things, and then it's just terrible. So, Vanya, addictions, when you see someone who's got, say, well, first off, why are we so wired to go for the negative, unhealthy options in life as opposed to the healthy options? And when you do see someone who comes to you, presents with, say, nicotine addiction or alcohol addiction, how does that look to you? And why is it so hard to break some of these addictions?
Okay. Where do we begin? It's like 3 questions in one
there. There's a terrible journalistic effort there, actually. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with why do humans seem to, and if I'm wrong, they seem to me, but if I'm wrong, let me know, always go for the unhealthy approach or option or solution?
Yeah. Because I think those, we're looking for comfort. We're looking to kind of retract back into our little hole. Do you know? So I think what happens is, you know, we've had a hard day at work, we come home, we have that whiskey or whatever, it brings us back to ourselves, it brings us back to our little comfort nest. It allows us to shut down from the outside world and have that bit of communication with self. So I think we've forgotten perhaps how to just have quiet time with ourselves.
Right.
And so life is quite busy and full of stuff going on, and there's lots of that we don't, and then our minds are busy and our emotions are busy, and maybe there's stuff that hasn't been resolved, and so addictions end up being this time to kind of have a break from it all.
Right.
Switch off maybe,
Yeah.
or chill out. You know, alcohol can, you know, change the neurochemistry in the brain, give you more dopamine, which is a more rewarding feeling. It can calm you. And I guess if you have excess, it can make you go the other way with some people. So I believe it's people trying to connect back to themselves. A lot of people who smoke cigarettes, it's a way of them having that break, being able to connect back to themselves. And you know, when I speak to people that have got, you know, cigarette addiction, it's a way that they get clarity of their life. So they go have that cigarette and they get that aha moment of what they need to do or whatever it is. So I really believe it's stemming from a place of us not spending enough time by ourselves without other distractions, so that we can really, you know, just have a quiet space, shut down, and then re-nurture ourselves to take a better step forward.
So these things really are crutches, because people talk about them as crutches. They really are crutches in order to help us just keep going at the manic pace we often go at.
Yeah, sometimes. So some people that are using, like I know people that smoke a lot there, you know, it's part of, you know, what they do to keep their adrenaline going, and you know, they get to have that 5-minute break every now and then, you know, to go have a cigarette. Well, why can't you have a break without a cigarette? We're kind of trained that we have to keep working, keep going. So I guess you heard about in the 80s all the bankers having lots of cocaine to keep going, you know, so that they were always on top of it and they could make snappy decisions and be entertaining and all of those things.
Yes.
So, and you know, we have, even if you just look at human history or different cultures, there's always been some stimulant there.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a new thing. We've always used stimulants, we've always used
mind-altering substances.
Yeah, in different ways for whatever reasons. But I think what's happened is it's lost its, perhaps more of its greater purpose. So we're just using it just to get through the basis of life, as opposed to using it maybe to have a more extraordinary experience.
Okay. So when someone presents to you, when you get a client who is addicted to alcohol or addicted to cigarettes perhaps, how does it look to you energetically? How does an addiction look to you?
Alcohol and cigarette look very different to me actually.
Okay.
So when I see cigarette addiction, it depends. I see the person's actually formed it's almost like a second energy body which is related to the cigarette. So, the cigarette becomes like their friend. It helps them to move into a different space inside themselves.
Right.
So I often see people with cigarette, there's like a split in personality is not the right word to use, but a split in energy. So they operate from a space of not having the cigarette and they operate from a space of having the cigarette.
Right.
So I do see those two things going on. And so people smoke for different reasons. People smoke because it's their friends. People smoke because it gives them boundaries and clarity to come back to themselves. People smoke as a way of dealing with a lot of emotion that they have inside because it's a way of pacifying them on some level. So the reasons why people smoke are very, very different. People smoke when they're stressed, when they're angry, when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're celebrating, and then all of a sudden smoking becomes an everyday part of life that you do for whatever feeling you're having or whatever, you always have a cigarette after a coffee, you always have a cigarette after a meal. So then it kind of moves into the daily kind of routine and pattern, so it can get really enmeshed into a person's life.
And there's also the physical addiction, because the body actually craves this nicotine, as well as the mental addiction to the habits and
it's absolutely physically addictive, the cigarette.
So how can somebody, because I'm sure we all know people who smoked for say 10 years and then they gave up for 10 years, but then something happens and suddenly they're right back where they were. Yeah. Is it because there's just something that stays there all the time?
You do see it quite a lot in people with smoking. Few things going on. Sometimes it's a genetic pattern, so if there's been generations upon generations smoking, it's almost like it's a generational ailment. So it becomes a lot of the genes or the subconscious is wired to fall back on the cigarette smoking because that's what it's happened for generations. So it's interesting to see how smoking travels through the family. The other thing is that people who start addictions, what addictions tend to do, cigarettes or alcohol, is it starts to stunt emotional growth, spiritual growth, and mental growth. Okay, so you particularly, more extreme, but particularly see it with people who take drugs. They're kind of emotionally stunted and mentally stunted at the age where they began because they never then began to develop the other skills to deal with things. And similar to cigarette smoking, but less extreme, I guess, on some level because it's not so altering. So it kind of like stunts the person from actually moving through certain issues that they perhaps should have worked through otherwise, that the cigarette kind of avoided or suppressed. So it could trigger up that, so they don't have the skill to fall back on, or the emotional skill, or the mental kind of strength to deal with it without the cigarette. So that can go on.
That's a tough one. So and that can make it. That's why it's so hard to stop these things sometimes, because then you've got to deal with whatever you haven't been dealing with for either 10 years, 5 years, 20 years or whatever. You've still got to deal with that thing.
And exactly. It doesn't go away.
Right. Okay. But as far as anyone who does want to, say, break the addiction of smoking, is there any advice or guidance that Universe can give them?
You've got to the easiest thing to begin with, apart from looking at why you're smoking and looking at all the emotions that you smoke for and all that kind of more psychological stuff that goes on, the two advices I give to people is, number one, they need to definitely don't go cold turkey, because what happens before, most of the time, is they go cold turkey, they stop taking it, and then something triggers and they go back onto it. And so it's this whole yo-yo thing. So what I usually recommend is that you start reducing the amount you have a day. So you stick to 8 a day and that's it. And so what happens then is that the time frame between cigarettes becomes longer.
Right.
And so therefore their mental strength or their emotional strength tends to build and the daily habit starts to change.
Right.
And then they do that successfully for a month or so. So sometimes it's a slower process, but it tends to work, or a week or whatever. And then they go down to 4 a day, 3, whatever it is.
Right. So don't be in too much of a hurry,
It just
because you're going to
seem
set yourself up for
kind
potential failure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always, but as soon as you say that, there's people who are going to say, well, I did it cold turkey and it worked for me. But generally speaking, you find it's more successful.
Yeah, but particularly those that are yo-yoed. I mean, some people just give up like that, and that's great. So good for them.
Yeah,
But some people, you know, especially if you've been up and down, and especially for those that have been like, oh, I've got to give up, but I can't, or I really should stop smoking, but I can't, and there's a whole mental drama around it, then just change the goalposts, so to speak. So, and the other thing is changing the type of cigarette that you're having.
Oh, okay.
So I know obviously people just stick to the same brand the whole time.
This brand.
And so they, you know, I mean, in each brand, some brands are more toxic than others. I won't mention any names because I think that might be
sued.
Yeah.
Will be sued.
But there are definitely some brands which are more addictive. They put more addictive substances in them to keep you kind of hooked. So choose the more natural ones, choose different brands, and then that will change the way that the body and the mind and emotions is relating to that cigarette, which will then break some other patterns that are going on there.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there, but for today, after this discussion, I think we'll have to do food addictions another day, maybe.
Yeah, no problem.
Because that's a common one, I think. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Interesting. Thank you for watching. Appreciate that, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.